Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/PettyRevenge. In today's episode, my boyfriend looked up spoilers to our favorite video game, so I did, too. Quit my job at an upscale steakhouse, but not before making sure all the customers knew what a prick the owner was. Can't buy a homeless man a pizza? Fine by me. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. My boyfriend looked up spoilers to our favorite video game, so I did, too. My boyfriend and I play Zelda, Breath of the Wild together. I am a take your time and enjoy the ride kind of gal, while he is a let's look up how to beat this game right now kind of guy. Because his way ruins all the fun, we came up with a rule. No looking up spoilers. We were looking for a particular challenge, the 8 heroine side quest for my fellow Zelda nerds, for a very long time. Suddenly, my boyfriend said, "I did something bad. I looked up where to go. I'm so sorry. I just couldn't take it anymore." I told him it was fine, but that he could not tell me what he had seen. He agreed. I then excused myself to the bathroom and looked up the location as well. I then spent the next hour and a half wandering so close to the location without ever making it there. I could see him squirming around in his seat every time I got close. When I jumped off the cliff the statue was built into, gliding down to the base of the statue and continuing on without turning around to look at it, I thought he was going to explode. He was clenching his hair in both fists and biting his lower lip trying to contain himself. That's when I caved and told him what I had done. He thought it was hilarious and told me about how he wanted more than anything to yell "turn around. What are you doing?" We had a good laugh about it. He hasn't looked up a spoiler since. This is the kind of wholesome petty revenge we all needed to see today. Please, don't spoil for me how this relationship goes. And he wasn't toxic when she played him. He saw the humor and learned his lesson without throwing a nice gamer guy tantrum. This relationship is going to last. I really love how he wasn't annoyed when you told him and you both got a good laugh. Nothing is worse than trying not to backseat game when you are watching a friend who is so close to doing something but just keeps barely fumbling. This is delightful and wholesome. Well played. This is the kind of relationship drama more people need. Y'all seem good together. So we came up with a rule, we do it my way, no exceptions. LOL, this exactly what I was thinking. That sounds like quite the compromise. Thought this as well. My boyfriend likes to play games this way, I like to play games this way, so we play them the way I like to play and I expect an apology if he does it his way. And then everyone showers them with praise for the perfect relationship. But maybe I'm just a bit jaded because I have been in some really controlling relationships. I started playing Zelda for the first time ever yesterday on my daughter's Switch. I'm 52M. I spent 4 hours walking around protecting myself with a tree branch. Kept dying. What's this YouTube thing you speak of? Enjoy it. It's one of, if not the absolute, best games of all time. Let it be all about exploration and fun, and follow the story in your own time until you talk to the old lady in Kakariko Village. Then do what you want, though the general consensus is to unlock all towers at this point, while doing divine beasts as you feel, while finishing shrines along the way. Honestly, that's just as valid, and the devs are probably super happy some of us spend so much time admiring the details of the scenery. Open world games are the best. Quit my job at an upscale steakhouse, but not before making sure all the customers knew what a prick the owner was. This happened back in 2009, but I shared it in a comment on another sub yesterday and figured it belonged here too. I was waiting tables at an upscale steakhouse, and the company culture was absolute garbage. The owner, Gary, was constantly throwing tantrums and screaming at everyone, and we all hated him. He'd line us all up before every shift just to berate us and yell how lucky we were that he'd hired us, because we were all shit at our jobs and no one else would ever have us. stuff like that. The only reason anyone ever stuck around was because the money was good due to the high ticket prices and solid customer base, as well as the fact that there weren't many other employment options for fine dining service in the area. In addition to being a massive prick, Gary was also a cheap bastard. There was this 6-foot-tall dessert cooler in the kitchen that had a broken door, and he put off fixing it for months because he didn't want to spend the money, so it was just sort of hanging on its hinge and you had to be really careful opening it. Inevitably, during the height of a Saturday night rush, it fell completely off and hit one of the servers hard. So she's laying there on the kitchen floor, bleeding from a serious-looking wound on her head, and Gary is standing over her and screaming down at her, "Way to go, just brilliant. What am I supposed to do now? It's the middle of the rush, you've got a full section, and no one's going to be able to pick up your tables because everyone who works here is useless and incompetent. You should have been more careful." I'd seen a lot of his shit, but this was the hard line, and I made a decision right then that I was out. So when I got home that night, I typed up a letter to Gary, telling him exactly why I was quitting and leaving no detail out when it came to his tantrums, his verbal abuse, and the hazards in the workplace that he wouldn't address. I printed out 30 copies, went in early for my opening shift the following day. Mid-afternoon, the place was only open for dinner, and hid them all over the restaurant where guests would find them, in the menus, under the napkins on the tables, in between paper towels in the restrooms, etc. Some were in really obscure places, so that they wouldn't be found right away and would keep popping up randomly, surprise. Allowing my legacy to live on. Then, instead of working my shift, I left before the pre-shift lineup. Fast forward to a couple days later, when a coworker reached out and shared with me the beautiful details of Gary's head almost exploding with rage when he found out about the letters. A couple tables read them and walked out before ordering. People in the dining room could hear him screaming from the kitchen. Apparently, they were still finding letters weeks later, and every time one surfaced, the vein in Gary's forehead would pop out and he'd disappear into his office and slam the door. It remains one of my proudest moments, and my only regret is that I couldn't be a fly on the wall, watching this all unfold. I chose to believe the remaining employees are still hiding copies of this letter around the restaurant every time someone quits. Just change the name on the bottom of who it's from to now include each employee who quit after. Holy shit. Hopefully they went out of business as word got out? The place itself is still in business, but I'm pretty sure it's under new ownership, thankfully. I would be happy with Gary being fired. Lifelong good food when there is limited fine dining in the area. Genius. Absolute genius. I hope that girl laid charges against him for her injury them a personal claim. I am usually the person who preaches to leave the job with dignity, no matter how bad the circumstances, but this was effed up. Gary got what he deserved. You should have made more copies. Honestly, leaving my job at Sears in a blaze of glory was a top 10 life moment, lol. I fully support leaving bullshit jobs in the most spectacular way possible. Can't buy a homeless man a pizza? Fine by me. Back in the early 2000s, I worked at a well-known US pizza delivery chain store. For anyone who has ever worked in the US food service industry, you're probably familiar with what a failing dumpster fire of a restaurant looks like. On many nights it was literally just me and one driver taking care of the whole restaurant. Breaks were out of the question because the restaurant would be completely unattended. The recent franchise buyers were complete and total idiots who would show up unannounced to yell at me, and the overwhelming majority of our customers ordered once and then never again. We had pizza deliveries taking 90+ minutes, people bringing them back to the store. It was a nightmare. And I got paid $8.50 per hour to run shifts. One night I was running a shift and it was particularly dead. Such nights were not uncommon and they were basically the only reason I still worked there. Well, 11 p.m. rolls around as I'm kind of standing by the phones watching the clock tick down, and a clearly homeless man walks in. He introduces himself as Ricky and asks if we had any leftover pizzas that nobody picked up. I apologetically inform him that we didn't. He smiles and thanks me anyway, but then since I'm in such a good mood, I ask him what he wants. He says he likes the meat lover's pizza. Since he isn't a sociopath like some of our customers, I'm looking at you, Mr. Teriyaki Bacon and Sardines guy, I say I'll be happy to make him one. Ricky at this point is so thankful that he sits down in one of our chairs and starts bouncing up and down like a little kid. I put the order in and pay for it myself. It ends up being $12, or basically an hour and a half of work for me. Good deal in my mind. Ricky watches me and applauds my dough slapping / spinning skills. As the pizza comes out of the oven, in comes the area manager, the brother of the franchise owner. He begins shouting as usual and accuses me of stealing from the store. As he goes into his tirade, one of our few regulars, Henry, comes in. Henry hears the tirade and looks very uncomfortable. I finally tell the area manager that I paid for the pizza out of my own pocket. Area manager shouts a bit more, calls me a liar, says the count better be right that night, and leaves. I apologize to Henry and Ricky, who both tell me, an 18-year-old kid, yeah, work sucks, doesn't it? Ricky gets his pizza, Henry gets his, and they leave around the same time. I see them talking outside. The next night, Henry calls me for an order. This was unusual because he was generally a once-a-week guy. I also found it unusual that he ordered a meal lover's pizza instead of his usual Supreme. I took it, made it, and 20 minutes later Henry calls again apologetically to cancel it. I say okay. In a bizarre coincidence, Ricky rolled in right around that time asking for a pizza. I just so had one that was going to go uneaten sitting under the heater. And so began the nightly dance. Henry would call, order a meat lover's pizza, and I'd make it. Henry would then call again, cancel, and Ricky would coincidentally roll in. Every night, same time. You could time it to the second. This went on for months. Eventually, the area manager caught wind because a bootlicker coworker of mine narked on me, but I responded that I was just doing my job as instructed. They then stopped putting me into the schedule rotation in a quiet-firing sort of way, but I really didn't care. The restaurant went under about a year later. Obviously, it wasn't all Henry, but I was glad to see it go. Thank you for feeding that man as many times as you did. This story made my whole night better. I've had to deal with homeless people more than a few times when I worked retail. You want a meal? I got you. I just wish I could have helped more. They usually have some nasty problems. You and Henry are now the patron saints of pizza. Saint Anthony can move over. His seat was empty anyway. I keep him busy finding all the lost and missing stuff around here. I proclaim them to be worthy of the pantheon of righteous protectors and compatriots of the Knights of the Order of St. Louis of the Garden Hose. Good people doing good for the sake of being good. I love it. Besides, if a business can't cover the loss of one pizza a day, when most pizza places will give their employees free food anyway, they don't deserve to be in business. Yeah, that was the crazy thing to me too. One single pizza is a blip in the inventory. I know because I did inventory every night. On a busy night we'd be something like 3 to 4 pizzas worth of ingredients short naturally because we tended to go heavier than the recommended guidelines on the cheese, as putting the recommended amount of cheese on a pizza would piss the customer off. It was way too little. To me, the best part is imagining Ricky rolling into the camp or shelter or wherever he was that night, and giving slices out to whoever needed one. Paying it forward, good man. At my former store, we had a customer that placed a large order for a party, to be picked up a little later. We were called around pickup time by the customer, to be told to please cancel it. They had to stop their party for a medical emergency in the family. So we had several pizzas sitting there. My GM and I are both veterans, and we have a VA hospital not far, with a housing shelter for the homeless vets. We donated almost all of them to the shelter. We had construction going on the interstate, with some random local PD officers stuck doing guard duty on the traffic. So I decided to drive by a few of their locations and drop off some free dinner for their long, overnight shift. They were quite surprised to see a delivery driver rolling up to their squad car, asking if they want food. But I knew a lot of them from working security at a couple major locations for a few years. Good for you, Henry and Ricky. And your ex-bosses can go pound sand. I'm glad you were there for the homeless man, and the other man who was more well-off was awesome too with that arrangement he had with the other man. I hope your other less kind co-workers can get better compassion than what they gave to you. I used to work the overnight shift at 711. The shift before me were meant to have all the food from dinner tossed and the warmers/rollers cleaned by the time I came in, but that usually never happened. The first hour or two of my shift were pretty busy, so I usually just waited until it slowed down to take care of the old food plus cleaning. I actually never gave away any of it, nobody asked, and it wasn't something I'd considered before. Anyways, this guy comes in and I give the typical "how are you doing," and his response was "broke and hungry," in a casual tone while I'm ringing his stuff up. Don't know what it was about him saying that, but I started walking towards the food and said, "Do you want a hot dog?" I stopped him in his tracks, lol. Turns out he was a radio host from a really popular station in the area, was actually just joking, and thought it was nice AF that I offered. Said he was going to give me a shout out, he didn't LMAO. I was confused for a bit, but it's one of my most interesting interactions. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.